There are some kids' TV shows that just live in your brain forever. You watch them as a child, often on repeat. And if you grew up in the UK like me, chances are a lot of us were watching CBeebies. And you get really familiar with the shows that were shown on this channel. But eventually you grow up and move on to the TV channels for older kids. Some of these shows you remember, but you haven't watched them since you were little. For me, they're a core part of my childhood and, I remember them fondly. So imagine my confusion when I found out that a lot of these shows have been rebooted. And I don't mean they were popular and they just got a new season. I mean fully reanimated, redesigned, and now they look completely emotionally unrecognizable. So today we're talking about children's TV reboots and why they feel like meeting an old friend who now works for a corporation. So what is a reboot? A reboot is basically when they take a show, they keep the same characters and the same name of it, but they give it new animation and a new design, and it feels kind of like a personality transplant. Is meant to be for a new generation of kids, which there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes it feels like the show itself didn't give consent. Okay, the first example is Thomas the Tank Engine. And I think this is a really example of this phenomena. Old Thomas used physical sets, and I really like that. I like stop motion and all those things. It reminds me of those like detailed hobby train layouts, the kind that people spend years perfecting. Old Thomas, the trains didn't move very fast, and Thomas always looked slightly annoyed, which for me I find extremely relatable. But I loved the feel of it. It felt homemade and, like a one man show. And it felt like something I could have done, as a passion project. It feels like there was, genuine care and effort put into every shot. And then they rebooted it. And New Thomas is now fully CGI and he's very energetic. There's bright colors, he's a lot more expressive, and his face moves constantly now. And I don't know, the vibe of the show just has completely shifted. The old Thomas felt like, actions have consequences, you were learning with Thomas. But the new Thomas feels like he's just like, oh, let's go on an adventure, boys. And again, that's not bad, but the vibe has shifted from something that felt small and personal to something that feels much more corporate. Also, the narrator used to feel very important. He's like an authority figure, but now it feels like Thomas is in charge. And frankly, I don't trust him with that responsibility. Now let's talk about Bob the Builder. Original Bob the Builder was made using stop motion, and I really love stop motion. Morph is one of my favorite things. But everything was a little bit wonky, but it had soul. He looked like a man who'd actually been on a building site. Reboot Bob the Builder looks like he owns an iPad and never has touched cement in his life. And don't get me started on the theme song. It's just not for me. And what did they do to the gang? And then there's Teletubbies. And Teletubbies was a core part of my childhood. I absolutely loved it. And it's something that's like a staple in every British kid's childhood. And I love lore and theory videos. And even as a kid, I was just imagining how this world worked. Like, is it like a post nuclear apocalypse type thing? I was always fascinated by, like, the underneath their feet. Like, why does it look like that? What are the Teletubbies? Is it like a suit or are they the suit or like what's going on? Um, but it just felt like a made up magical world. And it kind of felt like a fever dream, but in like a really comforting way. But the reboot is higher budget with clearer visuals and smoother animation. But man, did they mess it up. I'm so sad about it. Like, why do they have an iPad in the Teletubby house? That's like the most Gen Alpha thing I have ever seen. And like, why did they have to like give Nunu a new look? Nunu was already perfect. And don't get me started on the Tiddlytubbies. I hate the name. How did they come up with that? It just makes it so much worse. But what are they? Like, do they grow? And like, why do they look so creepy? Everything being CGI now just makes it more unsettling. And have you seen them ride in the car? It's just awful. And I think it's just the thing with CGI. I think I prefer physical sets and just I don't know how nice it is, how much effort's put into it, and seeing like behind the scenes of it. I really appreciate it from like an artistic perspective. For having everything be CGI now, it just feels wrong. I feel like it just takes the soul out of it. Here's the thing though. I do understand that kids watching now probably don't know the originals of these shows. And let's be real, this generation was basically born and immediately introduced to Cocomelon. So, like, I get that the creators felt like they had to adapt these shows, and mostly for attention. Kids just don't have a good attention span. Even me, like, my generation does not have a good attention span either. But I don't think that really makes it any better. I feel like the older shows were like a lot slower and a lot quieter and less overstimulating. And, you were able to like breathe. It wasn't constant overstimulation. And that feels like a very modern problem. I think we live in a world where attention spans are getting shorter and shorter, but I don't think leaning into that has any long term benefits. If anything, I think it's mostly the opposite. I don't think children's TV needs to stay frozen in time, but I do think some of these shows were just perfect the way they were, and they don't really need a reboot. Some things are allowed to just exist as memories. Slightly blurry, slightly strange, but perfect anyway. Are there any kids' shows you grew up with that got rebooted? And did you like it, or did it feel unsettling? You thought the video was over? You really thought I'd make a video about children's TV reboots and not talk about Noddy? Absolutely not. There may be more than this, but I'm familiar with three Noddy eras. The first was before my time. It's called Noddy's Toyland Adventures. This version was made in the 90s, and I watched an episode of it, and it's completely different from the modern children's TV shows we're used to. The theme song was like a lullaby. It's so calming, and watching and listening to it felt like I was going to fall asleep. And I feel like this is the type of thing your nan would put on, go to the kitchen and make you some hot chocolate, then just let the show make you sleepy before bedtime. This Noddy feels like one of those shows that existed purely to keep children calm. And as you can tell, I love stop motion animation. I love that it just feels like a toy box land, but like handmade. And it was so gentle. And then they rebooted it. Okay, this is the Noddy from my childhood. It's called Make Way for Noddy. And this Noddy did use CGI. And clearly we've established that I much prefer stop motion. But I still love this Noddy. It's the most nostalgic one for me. This is the 2000 CGI that, looking back, I don't remember it looking like this. In my memories, it just looked better. It looked, smoother, but I still loved it. And it's a bit more lively than the last Noddy, but not overstimulating. For this video, I watched the first episode, Too Many Noddies, and honestly, it really reminds me of me. It was quite strange to watch. It's like watching my ADHD brain. It's like what happens when I try to multitask. I tried to do like 10 things at once and then not actually ending up finishing anything or doing what I'm meant to be doing. And it was really strange to see like the parallels between this episode and just how my brain works. Okay, I really tried to be more optimistic going into this one. I was trying to tell myself that not all reboots are bad. But the more I learned, the more I disliked it. I don't think upgrading the animation is a bad idea, and it doesn't look bad. It's definitely an upgrade. I naturally just don't like change very much. I really like the idea of Gen Alpha learning about Noddy, and realistically, Gen Alpha is gonna prefer smoother animation. But there are just a few things I dislike about this new Noddy. I think, like other reboots, I don't like the fact that iPads are in all of them. And maybe I'm just really stubborn, but I feel like normalizing having a lot of screen time isn't that great. And I don't think it's bad for kids to have a little screen time, but I do think too much screen time is a big issue for Gen Alpha. And I think kids seeing their favourite character using screens just normalizes it, and I'm not really sure that's a good thing. And then, continuing watching this, Noddy, I noticed something. What is this? What did they do to Car? Old Carl was perfect, and now they've changed him, and he really did not need changing. So I don't hate reboots, but I just think I have a strong preference for stop motion animation. And I think I like the craftsmanship of it and all the skills involved. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of very skilled animators. But I also like the old style things more. If you've ever listened to the early episodes of our podcast, sorry for the audio quality, you'd know how much I love puppets. And some of these shows were just perfect the way they were. And none of them needed the addition of iPads. Okay, now I'm actually done. So, what children's TV show do you think should have never been rebooted? And which one do you secretly think kind of needed it?